Oh,
Welcome to the third Wednesday service of the UU Multiracial Unity Action Council. I'm Richard Trudeau. I'm a semi-retired minister in Massachusetts. I'm very involved in the Unitarian Church in Fall River, Massachusetts. That's my main occupation now. My sermon today is on the Good Samaritan. I'm going to say that the gospel writer Luke misunderstood Jesus's message. And every priest and minister who's been preaching on the Good Samaritan is doing the same, and that there's really something else going on there. Let me talk a little bit about our organization.
hello.
We envision our congregations, associations, and communities as not being color blind, but color appreciative, as judging and treating people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, their cultural heritage, or other identity, and as treasuring diversity in the context of Martin Luther King
I'm
Jr.'s
getting
beloved
video.
community.
I'm getting video, but no, I can't hear him.
Matt, would you please mute Dick Burkhart?
I've been doing it repeatedly. He's somehow able to unmute himself.
Well, of course, everyone's able to unmute themselves. Yeah. We call this vision multiracial unity. This is the goal. This is the mountaintop. This is the prize we seek, the unity of the light and dark-skinned people of the world. In the last year or two, we've published 2 books. This one, Fighting Neo-Racism and Unitarian Universalism. We have decided that the so-called anti-racist approach of the UUA and the UUMA is actually promoting racial discord. We think it's wrongheaded, and we have selected articles from the first 7 years of our journal that focus on that issue. And then here's another more recent book by our founder, the Reverend Dr. Finley Campbell, who was a near contemporary of MLK and also born in the South and also a Baptist minister, had many of MLK's experiences, and became a member of a Unitarian Universalist congregation and saw what the UUA was doing and objected to it. This is not specifically about the UUA, though he mentions the UUA quite frequently. Our next service is March 18th. It'll be called God, Not God. That's the sermon by Reverend Dr. Matthew Shear. And I'd like to read his description of the service. When someone asks you, do you believe in God? What do you answer? My answer is, tell me what you mean by God. And now we're having a conversation rather than an argument, because God, not God, is not really a yes-no question. There are many expressions of deity, even within traditional monotheistic religions like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. In exploring this topic, this service aims to help us develop skills useful in diffusing one of the major sources of polarization in society today. And let's see, what am I doing? I'm making a computer mistake here. Did I stop sharing? Have I stopped sharing?
You are not
You never
sharing.
shared for anything.
Good. We're looking at one another's faces now, right? Good. I wanted to light a chalice to begin the service. We gather this hour as people of faith, having sorrows and joys and needs and gifts. We light this beacon of hope as a sign of our quest for truth and meaning, and in celebration of the life we share together. I want to go back to sharing. This is the parable of the Good Samaritan. I'm sure you know it, but I'll read it quickly anyway. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." This is in the Gospel of Luke. That's the only place it is it the Gospel of Luke? And it was a problem for Luke, I think. You see, Luke wasn't Jewish. I'm pretty sure he didn't know what a Samaritan was. I think he seems to have thought of Samaritan as a geographical reference, like Galilean or Judean. He didn't realize that Jews hated Samaritans. Anyway, he wasn't Jewish. This is the consensus of scholars, people who know much more about this than I. He wasn't living in Israel, and he was writing probably 3 generations after Jesus's death. Jesus died about the year 30. The conventional date for the Gospel of Luke is about 85. You may have heard that. But I'm persuaded that it was written later because just recently a scholar named Richard Purvo devoted decades of his life to studying the book of Acts in the New Testament, the book called the Acts of the Apostles. And Richard Purvo has concluded in a quite a large book, but persuasive, called Dating Acts, that the Acts of the Apostles was written about 150, or excuse me, 115 AD. That's relevant because everyone agrees that the book of Acts was also written by Luke, by the same person who wrote the Gospel of Luke. And it just it doesn't seem likely if Acts was written in 115 that the Gospel was written a full 30 years earlier. You know, it just doesn't seem likely. So with Acts pushed to 115, I think we should think of Luke as being written around the year 100 rather than the year 85. So here's this non-Jew. He's a Christian, of course, but he's not a Jew. I mean, this is long after the separation between Judaism and Christianity. He's not living in Israel. He's not familiar with that area. He's writing 3 generations after Jesus's death, and he has inherited this story. He's either found it on some manuscript that no longer exists, or perhaps it was just passed down to him orally. And you might say, well, if it was passed down orally, how accurate could it be over 70 years or more than 70 years? Well, it's a parable. And parables survive a lot of retelling. They're like jokes. You can take a joke and you can change the names of the characters and you can change the name of the city and this kind of stuff. You can make a lot of changes, but if you keep the hook, if you keep the part that makes the joke funny, the joke survives these modifications. And so it's the consensus of everyone who studies the historical Jesus that, yeah, this is really a genuine parable of Jesus. And somehow Luke acquired it. He wanted to put it in his gospel, but he had to ask himself, well, what's the message here? What is Jesus's message? And Luke didn't know, and he supplied a message. And he did this by putting the parable in a frame that exists today. But before I get to that, let me pause just to take a little break, and then I'll get back to this. I want to share my favorite prayer. I call it Lucky Mud. It doesn't have a title. It's in Kurt Vonnegut's novel Cat's Cradle, which is the novel in which he addresses religion more directly than in any other novel. It's just a few pages from the end, and I've edited it a little, and I'll stop sharing. It's my favorite prayer. I've memorized it. If I get stuck, I can look it up in a book across the table here. Because it's Vonnegut, it's tongue in cheek, but it's also deadly serious at the same time. That's Vonnegut. Vonnegut was a Unitarian, by the way. Could we please be joined in a spirit of prayer or meditation? God made mud. God got lonesome. So God said to some of the mud, sit up, see all I've made, the hills, the sea, the sky, the stars. And I was some of the mud that got to sit up and look around. Lucky me, lucky mud. I, mud, got to see what a nice job God had done. Nice going, God. Nobody but you could have done it, God. I certainly couldn't have. I feel very unimportant compared to you. In fact, the only time I feel the least bit important is when I think of all the mud that didn't even get to sit up and look around. Most mud, I got so much, and most mud got so little. Thank you for the honor. Soon, mud lies down again and goes to sleep. What memories for mud to have? What interesting other kinds of sitting up mud I met. Almost everything I saw, I loved. Amen. This is the beginning of Luke's frame. I believe this is fiction. And the consensus of biblical scholars is this is not part of the parable. This is not Jesus. This is Luke. And this is almost certainly fiction. Luke puts this right before the parable. Just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said to him, what's written in the law? What do you read there? The lawyer answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus said to him, you've given the right answer. Do this and you will live. Before going on, let me look at this word eternal. It literally means outside of time. If it means outside of time, a kind of lofty understanding of the term, this could go back to early Christianity, but I don't think it does. Pretty soon Christians started to think of eternal as meaning never ending. In other words, an afterlife. Christianity became, it's not Jesus's religion, right? Jesus was a Jew. He lived and died a Jew. He wasn't a Christian. Christianity is a religion about him, invented after he was dead. And for a lot of Christians, the meaning of Christianity, it's a key to getting into heaven. It's a key to an afterlife. And if that's what's going on here, then this is evidence that this doesn't go back to the time of Jesus at all, because back then that was not an issue. Certainly not with Jesus. Jesus may not have believed in an afterlife. There was a major party of Jewish leaders, the Sadducees, the party that controlled the temple in Jerusalem, that did not believe in an afterlife. Jesus may not have believed in an afterlife. He certainly wasn't interested in giving people a key to an afterlife. Anyway, so Jesus said, "You've given the right answer. Do this and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor? And who is my neighbor?" And then comes the parable, this. So here's Jesus's words. I won't repeat it again, but then comes the parable. And then comes the end of the frame in which Luke has put the parable. This is supposedly Jesus talking. Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? And the lawyer said, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. Jesus's parables, though, are not morality tales. Jesus's parables do not have morals like this. Go and do likewise. They're not like that. I can't think of any that's like that offhand. There may be some, but for the vast majority of the parables of Jesus are not morality tales. So, well, let me talk a little bit about parables. Let me stop sharing. Let me stop sharing. There was a biblical scholar named C.H. Dodd, D-O-D-D, who defined parable, and I buy this. He said, a parable is a metaphor or simile drawn from nature or common life that arrests the hearer by its vividness or strangeness, leaving the mind of the hearer in sufficient doubt as to its precise application as to tease the mind into active thought. The parables are not morality tales, they're puzzles. Jesus is trying to implant something in your mind. He's trying to get you to think about something. The way, I think, to understand one of Jesus's parables, and by the way, the struggle to understand one of these parables can be really kind of I don't want to call it a spiritual experience, but an exciting experience. You feel a link with this long ago intelligence who fashioned this story, despite all the intervening theological nonsense. The way into one of Jesus's parables is to ask yourself first, what did everybody know back then? What did everybody know? And that's relevant because what everybody knew didn't get written down. It didn't get written down. So you need to know this. And what you need to know about this parable, of course, is what a Samaritan was. Originally, there was this Israelite kingdom of David and Solomon. And during Solomon, the next king, it split into two kingdoms. The northern kingdom seceded, and the southern kingdom therefore regarded them as traitors. And their capital eventually was a city called Samaria. So you have two kingdoms, a southern kingdom whose capital is Jerusalem, and a northern kingdom whose capital is the city of Samaria. And that whole, by the time of Jesus, that whole northern kingdom was called simply Samaria. And they had evolved over 900 years a different version of the Jewish religion. They had a different Torah. I mean, it was a lot like the Torah of Judah, but it was different. And they had their own temple. The original temple was on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. Well, the Samaritans had a temple on Mount Gerizim, in Samaria, the Samaritans were regarded as traitors, heretics, evil people. Jewish people were brought up to think of Samaritans as enemies. Now, Luke seems not to know this, and the reason I say that is look at what he says Jesus's message is. Luke says Jesus's message is go and do likewise. Be like the Samaritan. If Jesus really wanted to persuade people to care for others, especially others in trouble, like the man who had fallen into the hands of the robbers, if Jesus wanted, if that was his message, does it make sense that he would say, go and be like this enemy? If I could just change the context for a minute, suppose I wanted to convince you to be a vegetarian. Well, now my understanding is that Hitler was a vegetarian. If I wanted to convince you to be a vegetarian, would it be wise for me to say, be like Hitler? I don't think so. Luke is making Jesus act like a fool here, I think. Luke, of course, is completely innocent. Luke's message is we should care for people. We should be nice to people. It's a fine message. I'm not being critical of that. I'm just saying it's not Jesus's message. It's not Jesus's message. So the first thing to find your way into a parable of Jesus, ask yourself, what did everybody know? Everybody knew that Samaritans were hateful people. The second thing, the second way into a parable of Jesus is ask yourself, which character in the parable would the members of Jesus's audience identify with? Now, Jesus's audience mostly was peasants and displaced peasants. By peasants, I mean subsistence farmers, people just eking out a living, and displaced peasants. When the Roman Empire took over Jesus's country, just a few decades before he was born, the tax level went up. The taxes on the peasants went up. A lot of peasants had to mortgage their land, which was all they had to pay the taxes. And a lot of these mortgages were foreclosed on. And little peasant farms were assembled into big estates that went into the hands of people friendly with the new Roman rulers. In other words, it was a lot like today. And these are the people in Jesus's audience, peasants and displaced peasants, mostly poor people who are being oppressed by the Roman takeover of their country. And Jesus is trying to draw on Judaism to bring them comfort and encouragement. That's how I understand who he was. So who would these people identify with of the characters in the Good Samaritan parable? Well, not with the priest or the Levite, because they were religious officials. Not with the innkeeper, right, who had an economic level above that of the people in Jesus's audience. The people in Jesus's audience would identify with the man left for half dead. They'd identify with him, the victim, the only person present through the whole parable. They'd identify with him. Okay, one more thing. I need to talk about the kingdom of God. That's Jesus's message, right? He's always talking about the kingdom of God. It's a bad translation. The phrase, the New Testament is written in Greek, and kingdom of God is a translation of the Greek expression vasilia tou theou. Tou theou means of the God, or in English we'd say of God. And vasilia, yes, can be translated kingdom. And because the first English translations were made in England, which is a kingdom, of course, the word was translated kingdom. But Jesus lived in the Roman Empire. I'm pretty sure he didn't say kingdom of God. He said empire of God, or more gracefully, God's empire. Jesus was talking about God's empire. And I don't think he meant some kind of afterlife. He had a vision of what this world could be like if there were peace and justice and enough to go around. And he expressed it this way. It's what the world would be like if it was being run according to God's laws instead of Roman law. That's what he meant by, I believe, God's empire. It was a vision he had. Many of his parables are preceded by him saying, the kingdom of God is like this in our translations. God's empire is like this. The parables are his attempt to implant his vision into the brains of his hearers by getting them to pay a little attention to this tale he's told that he hopes is intriguing enough that they'll mull it over. He wants them to think about this issue with the Samaritan. Well, if his hearers are identifying with the man left half dead and are drawn into the story, what happens as they hear the story is they have the vicarious experience that the man has. And his experience is to be cared for by someone he's always thought of as his enemy. I think that's Jesus's message. He's saying, in God's empire, you would have this experience. You would have the experience of being cared for by people that you think of as your enemies. I think that's the message. It's not the message Luke has produced, be nice to people. And unfortunately, of course, every priest and every minister just repeats Luke's message. In fact, turns most of Jesus's parables into morality tales. Be good, be good. No, no, no. That's not what they are. He's trying to implant this vision that he called God's empire, I think, anyway. We're about done. I just want to make a little push for membership at the end here. We, of course, don't have an offering. Our slogan is the unity of the light and dark-skinned people of the world. We are the UU Multiracial Unity Action Council. We are a membership organization. Membership is $30 a year. If you go to our website, 40?
40.
Oh, it went up.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yes, at the beginning of the year. You haven't updated your slide.
Oh, I have to change the slide. Thank 40. Okay, the membership is $40 a year. And that pays for our activities. And I wish you'd, if you're not familiar with us, I wish you'd go to our website and look around, read some of the things that are there, follow some of the links, and you might think we're an organization worth supporting. And thus ends our service. It's shorter than usual because I left out the music and things that we often do in our services. And now, if you would like, this is a time of discussion, which can be on anything. Of course, you don't have to talk about the sermon where you use. We can talk about anything we want, but that's what we do now. And then when things peter out, we stop. And if you use the raise hand feature at the bottom, which on some of our screens have an explicit little hand there. If you click that, it'll put a yellow hand in your screen and bring your screen to the front of the line, and it makes it easy for me to call on people in the right order. Wesley, please unmute.
Okay, actually, I don't think this is so strange because this is the way I tell it. I've always told it this way. And the reason I've always told it this way, particularly so, is this is someone who is rescued by plug in whatever person that you're prejudiced against.
Yeah.
I actually saw this thing happen before me. I was in high school, and I was going along with a fellow who was LRY, uh, the LRY counselor who picked me up at the bus depot, and there was a guy lying in the street. And the fellow I was talking to was a doctor. And he said, I have to stop and I have to take care of this man. This was before Minnesota now has called a Good Samaritan law, but it didn't at the time. He said, I don't know exactly. I never know what's going to happen to me if I do this because I could get sued and so forth. But he picked up the least promising guy on the street line there. But I've always told the story as this is the story not of the Good Samaritan, but if you look at it, it's the story of the black man, the Spanish man, the American Indian, or if you're black, this is the good white man who you wouldn't ever expect to help you. This is the person that you least expect to help you. But I've always thought that's the meaning of the thing. So I agree with you, but I don't know if I'm being very helpful because that's the way I've always told it.
Well, that's good. That means what I claim is the meaning has gotten through anyway. Yeah. Yeah. David, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, so my takeaway from looking at this again, this parable, is a couple things. Number one, it's presenting the Samaritan as having compassion. On the opposite, it's showing that the priest and the Levite lack compassion. And I spent a number of years going down to Peru. I was married to a Peruvian, and I spent extended periods of time down there. And I could see where some people might have an animosity against the Catholic Church because when you're down there in those third world countries, you see the poverty and the despair in the street. But then you walk past a church, and most of them, I guess, are Catholic, beautiful, gilded, a lot of resources to put that up there. And I got, what a disparity, seeing the poverty around and then seeing this glorious structure. What a difference. And so I think also the creator of this might have tapped into the animosity that the common man had against, quote, organized religion back then. That's it.
No, thank you. And I'm glad you brought that up. I'm undecided myself whether that's part of the original parable or not. I mean, Jesus certainly, well, I think felt some alienation to the religious bureaucracy of Judaism because they were in bed with the Romans who were running the country. So maybe that kind of slap on the religious officials goes back to Jesus. I'm glad that Luke didn't make a big deal out of it, because by Luke's time, though, there was a lot of animosity between Judaism and Christianity. So maybe that developed later, in the transmission from Jesus's time to Luke's time. I don't know, but yeah, but I'm certainly glad that Luke didn't make more of it. Yeah. Anybody else on anything? Not necessarily this. By the way, if you want to say something, but you don't want to wind up on YouTube because this is being recorded, just say so and we can pause the recording and then you can speak and we can all hear you and discuss with you and then we can resume the recording afterward. But you have to say so. Wesley.
Okay, there's one odd thing that I picked up in this that has bothered me for some time, and I don't really have an explanation for it. Maybe you do. Is that the business about the priest and the Levite going by the man who has been left for dead may be wrong. And that's something about it. Or I put it this way, it could be an anomaly because overriding ritual purity, even if they were on their way to the temple, is that care of the dead is one of the greatest mitzvah of them all. If they thought he was dead, and I think compassion is right up there, but the business about his being possibly dead, and this presents it as though they were hard-hearted or something, or they were excessively religious. I don't have an answer for it, but it struck me as something that's odd if you study anything about Judaism.
Yeah, my understanding is that they it was forbidden for a high religious official to have any contact with a dead body. So that might explain their walking on the other side. Yeah.
except you're supposed to do it even if you're a high religious official. Now that's my understanding. You're the greatest. One of the greatest things you can do is to take care of the dead. Now I can be I may be wrong. I had two rabbis in the family, but I'm not a rabbi.
Mhm.
Although I read that I even read a dash of Hebrew, but I can't say whether for certain. But it struck me as a possible anomaly.
hmm hmm Yes, thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, hi. Richard, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. Um, as you can tell from the blurb for the service that I will be presenting in this space next month, we should all have an abiding concern about what can bring seeming antagonists together. And so this really is a wonderful bit of exploration into a very well-known source as to how to turn it into just such a parable. Very powerful. So thank you.
Mhm. Dick?
Yeah, I had a thought, the way you presented the contrasts the Jews of Jerusalem with, the Jews or ex-Jews further north as sort of kind of bitter enemies or something. I wonder if it might have been more like, say, Protestant versus Catholic or um, something like that, something a little more fraternal. There's often kind of animosities between uh, similar peoples, but I'm not sure if I'd always call them bitter enemies. What do you think about that? Or today, I say you have mainline Christians and fundamentalist Christians and that kind of thing.
I don't know enough about this. I know that traditionally people in Galilee, where Jesus was, that was a part. It had been a part of the north, but it was reconquered by the Maccabees and re-Judaized. So you had Galilee at the north. There was Orthodox Judaism, and you had Judea to the south, and in between was Samaria. And the
Mm-hmm.
people from Galilee going to Judah always went around Samaria. They either went over to the
Mm.
Mediterranean
Mm.
coast and then to Judea, or they crossed the Jordan, went down the east side of the Jordan, and then crossed in. But they avoided going through Samaria, and that's all I know. But that seems to have been the case. Jack?
Yeah, to your point, Dick, about the differences not leading to severe animosity, I offer you the case of Ireland, and look at the troubles there, between just because they were either Roman Catholic or Protestant.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't think your point is well taken.
Mm.
But there's something different about, you know, people are very similar, but maybe have historical animosities for some reason, but it's still not the same as someone totally different and having They're not just total strangers. It's maybe different than Christianity versus Islam, for example. Who knows? Or developed religion versus tribal religion or something.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Though, if you read Josephus, who of course is not, of course, if you're a Jew, you have some bad feelings about Josephus, and I'm not, because of course he became Romanized. But he tells a story, which is that Jerusalem might not have fallen, or it might not have fallen so quickly, as there was while the Romans were busy besieging Jerusalem, there was a battle going on right inside the city. There were people defending the top of the citadel against the people below, and they were having their very own religious war that was going on inside of, and so it gets pretty bad, even if it can get.
Wow.
I've always been kind of sad that the Christianity developed the way it did. The Christians started making these extraordinary claims about. I think of Jesus as a latter-day Israelite prophet, but his followers started making these extraordinary claims about him that that Jews just couldn't accept, and so there's been this division between the two, and most Jews today, they're allergic to Jesus for this perfectly understandable reason, but it's too bad. He was a latter-day Israelite prophet, I think, and he he's someone worth the Jews would be interested in talking about, I would think. But of course, he's been made allergic by all this crazy stuff.
Not by everyone, though. It's Dr. Fox, who was in South Shore Temple, wrote a book about Jesus, and Geiger in the early days of Reform in Germany wrote extensively about the Jewishness of Jesus. In Reform is not looked on quite the same way. Oddly enough, also in the, I think it's in the Talmud, some of the same stories that Jesus is supposed to have told about, tithing down to the tiniest mustard seed and all of these various other things and critiques of the various positions. Now, of course, there is a problem with that, is because, like in the history of religion, we're not entirely sure. Did they creep into the Talmud from Christianity? It's like in India, there's some thought that Krishna is a Christ figure that crept into I hesitate to call it Hinduism because that mainly came from the British, but it's unknown. But I mean, it is in. It's curious. Is this a reflection of the same sort of critique, or was it a critique outside after the end of it? And I don't know. I don't know anybody does.
And there was the Silk Road, that connected India to the Mediterranean, and it went right through Galilee, by the way. So it's conceivable that there's some connection there. Are we done?
I think so.
Oh
no,
no,
David's got a hand.
David has his hand up. Go ahead, David.
So I just wanted to share that a couple weeks ago at my Unitarian Fellowship, there is an organization called Stonewall Democrats. And at this, it was a Friday evening, kind of a fundraiser or whatever. But a lot of candidates that were running for office came. And of course, Stonewall is named after the riot that happened in New York City. That's where it got its name. But these candidates that showed up, I would say a good one-fourth to one-fifth were African American. And the vibe that I got was that those people walking onto the property of our Unitarian Fellowship felt they were going to get a receptive audience, which they did. And here's another experience that I have had that shows that, well, they talk about that the UUs have been negating African Americans or minorities, and I, I I could believe that happens, but here again, here was something that I saw where that was not the case. And prior to that, I have two grandchildren that are African American. I brought them to an Atlanta fellowship and I brought them here to Gainesville. And I've never caught a negative vibe for any attendees towards my kids or myself. And so I'm heartened by what I experienced, and it's sad when you talk about how people put out bad stories about other people, or they mispresent them. But I try to share that with people that when it's appropriate, that I just haven't experienced that racism. That's it.
Oh, I wasn't saying that about UUs as individuals. I was saying that about the policies of the UUA.
Right. But I mean, they're putting this out. The UUA is purporting that, which I consider is a false narrative, or certainly not totally accurate.
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah,
meant. Yeah.
I think the leaders were putting it out to get power for themselves more than anything else. Dick.
Yeah, that's a good point because I think the UUA leadership, from my observation, uh, I'm talking about sort of the newer leadership from the last decade or more, the woke identity politics leadership is out of touch with a good portion of the UU base, probably a majority, in fact. It's this woke ideology is actually a pretty narrow, elitist kind of thing that came out of the universities and whatnot. And so unfortunately, I think your David's experience down there is probably more the norm, except maybe in some of the bigger super liberal churches, which are more near universities, which are more influenced by the woke politics. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Matthew?
Yeah, well, I think that is happening because the opening was left for them to do that because of the difficulty that Unitarian Universalists have had in articulating just what it is we're doing, more than the religion of what we're not. And that's the place I like to preach from. And so next month I will present a certain take on that. But I did present a lot of this for NAUA in January, and you can go there and see it. So, and so, and I will recapitulate some of that here in this space next month, because repetition helps embed things in the mind. The more we hear these things, the easier it becomes for us to then get it into our head, like you said, right? The parable, right? It's getting it in your head so that we understand these things and we can articulate that, because we have a good thing here, and that's why we gather in this space. Uh, and just to use a little of the language I like, I had dubbed the various groups that were trying to prevent this radical change in Unitarian Universalism, I called us the religious resistance. But as we all know, we got thumped at General Assembly. And I think we find ourselves today as religious refugees. And we're looking for a place to be. We are displaced people, just like at the end of World War II. So we need to create that space. And this is the seed right here. So let us begin this process. Sorry, I guess I gave you a benediction there, Richard. Sorry.
Oh, I meant to give a benediction at the end of the service. I forgot. My favorite benediction is from Theodore Parker.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Go on. Hit me.
May ours be a religion that, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual, works of love. I really like that part about its creed, all truth, because so much of the woke stuff that's dominating the UUA and the UUMA, that stuff is not, it's not true. It's not, it's ideological. It's anyway. Alan or Anne.
Hi, it's Anne.
Hi.
I'd very much like to have that quote. Could you
It's in
email
the
it
back.
to me?
It's in the back of the hymnal.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised I haven't seen it. Okay, I will look for it.
I think
Thanks.
I think it's 563, but could be.
563?
It's
Well, let me double check.
I left off the last sentence because the last sentence doesn't make sense to me, or the last phrase, but it's from the back of the hymnal.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's not. It's. I was close to it, but I'll tell you before we're done, or I'll email it to you. Yes, the last line is it's profession of faith, divine living, and Richard has a reaction to that, but I love that line.
I kind of like it too,
Yeah.
actually.
So, but then the word divine is also triggering for many of us. But it is Theodore Parker. If you just look for Parker, and it'll refer you to that reading.
Gotcha.
I I used to be able to cite more accurately. Um, anyway, I lost whatever I was going to say.
Yeah,
So
that's fine.
my hand
That's
is
the job
down.
right there.
Okay, well there you go.
Thank
Okay,
you.
683.
683. Cool.
Now I will verify because, oh, yes, I was going to speak to reading 650, which says cherish your doubts. Like, you think you've got a good thing? Well, why don't you test it? Or what are you afraid to test it? I mean, if you test it and it's valid, well, then it emerges stronger. And if it wasn't, you say, oops, sorry. Right?
Now, that reminds me of someone who said, when someone refuses to debate you, that means they know that their position is indefensible.
Yes,
And
683. Sorry.
that speaks volumes about the attitude of the UUA and the UUMA, who are being censorious and authoritarian. It's because their positions are indefensible. That's why they won't discuss them. That's why there's no letters column in UU World anymore, not even online, where there's no restriction on space. No, no, no. Pushback is not allowed.
Well, I like the word argumentation, reasoned argumentation, right? Not It's not the mere proffering of opinion. You back it up with fact and reason. And of course, then people want to debate, what do you mean by reason and what's a fact and all this, but let's just keep it simple. By the way, so that reading is also appears in the hymnal as I think it's in the supplement, but they leave off that last line in singing the journey. So
Oh, so they're with me. Yeah. Dick.
yeah.
Yeah, on that note of truth, in Todd Eckloff's church in Spokane, when they have their sort of opening saying that they do every Sunday, uh, it concludes by saying, well, and wherever truth has been found, let there be a shadow of doubt.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, hymn 1058 sings that, but leaves off Richard's least favorite line. So There is that.
The reason why that caught my attention was I know the um, North American Unitarian Association is looking at possible principles and purposes, and I thought there was a lot of fodder there for that in that one quote.
Yeah, well,
Mhm.
I will be posting shortly my new set of principles. I think I'm going to send them to John Miller to be put into his wonderful publication. You know,
The
you
underworld,
UU World is, of course, a closed thing. So
yeah, yeah,
now we have,
the
well,
underworld.
we call it UU Underworld, but it's actually U Underworld to make the graphic look good. And John is doing a fantastic job, and I'm glad he's here. I'm glad he's doing what he has. And by the way, he's got how many subscribers now? 3,500, something like that, John. And if Unitarian Universalism has become, as I feel, an Iron Curtain country, John Miller is Radio Free Europe. And I'm very grateful to him for doing that. John, you're muted if you wish to speak.
No, I was just going to say thank you. It's kind of become a a tiger by the tail a little bit here, but because March is already going to be, looks like March will be about 125 or
Oh my
150
God.
days. Yeah. Yeah. I try not to say that too much because then it almost discourages people from sending something in. But I'm not buying ink or paper, so it works out well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, we need more such voices, and we have to penetrate there because the goal, right, is to save these churches and save the people in the churches, those who just because of having trouble articulating what it is that they are being propagandized, and they just don't know. So, and we're gonna get there. And even if we start small, let us not forget that the Transcendentalists started with four guys having lunch. So,
True.
yeah.
Oh, but
All
what
right.
God, yeah, yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Are we
Yeah,
done?
but I think they ended with four guys having lunch.
Oh, thanks. You can always count on Jack for a rousing finish there.
The register and the leader originally were regular papers that were subscription. They were subscription papers. They were like the Christian Science paper.
Mhm.
I mean, in comparison, they were a they printed news, they printed everything, printed ads. The ads paid for the papers, but for a long time, and I think I remember when it was actually finally absorbed into the organization because originally the register was quite independent. It was out there, and you paid for subscriptions and stuff. It was floating around there as an independent piece of journalism. It
Mhm.
wasn't. It wasn't like what you get with your telephone bill. Yeah, the oh,
Mhm. Mhm.
I could work on this thing. This chair
Shall we,
needs
shall we, shall
here.
we say good night? Okay, I'm getting nods. Good night. Thank you for coming. It was wonderful talking with you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Richard.
Right.
Alan, can
Yeah.
I get that address?